Sadantikam Vandanam Shri Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnava Shri Rupa Sakrajanam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Satvaitam Swavadudam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanushrute Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kirpa Sindhubhayeva cha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Ashwin, for the wonderful Mangalacharan recital. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Danvat Pranam. Please accept my humble obeisances on behalf of everybody who have joined the group and are about to join. Prabhuji, sorry for messing up today. We are reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on Canto 1, Chapter 13, and the text for today is text 18. So I know I have been shuttling between the two because of the change, and I take the blame entirely on myself. So I'm so grateful that you have accepted to do the text 80. Prabhuji, how would you like us to proceed?
Yes, so Madge, I can do the verse today. Please don't apologize. You know, mistakes happen, and I know how it is. I was the manner class scheduler for some time and made many mistakes, and it's difficult. So no worries at all. So I can perhaps start with I can recite the verse, and then if you could perhaps help me just complete the purport.
I can. Yes, Prabhuji.
Perfect. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Jeva Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudireye Nastaprayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. So today we're reading from the first canto, chapter 13, text 18. Chapter is entitled Dhritarashtra Quits Home. Vidurastarapi pretya Dhritarashtam abhasata Rajan nirgam yatam shigram Pasyedam bayam agatam. Word for word. Viduraha, Mahatma Vidura. That Abhipretya, knowing it well, Dhritarashtra, unto Dhritarashtra, Abhasata, said, Rajan, O king, Nirgam yatam. Please get out immediately. Shigram, without the least delay. Pasha, just see. Idam, this. Bayam, fear. Agatam, already arrived. Translation. Mahatma Vidura knew all this, and therefore he addressed Dhritarashtra, saying, My dear king, please get out of here immediately. Do not delay. Just see how fear has overtaken you. Maji, would you like to read the purport?
Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhuji, for this opportunity. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Cruel death cares for none, be he Dhritarashtra or even Maharaj Yudhishthira. Therefore, spiritual instructions, as was given to old Dhritarashtra, was equally applicable to younger Maharaja Yudhishthira. As a matter of fact, everyone in the royal palace, including the king and his brothers and mother, were raptly attending the lectures. But it was known to Vidura that his instructions were especially meant for Dhritarashtra, who was too materialistic. The word Rajan is especially addressed to Dhritarashtra significantly. Dhritarashtra was the eldest son of his father, and therefore, according to the law, he was to be installed on the throne of Hastinapur. But because he was blind from birth, he was disqualified from his rightful claim. But he could not forget the bereavement, and his disappointment was somewhat compensated after the death of Pandu, his younger brother. His younger brother left behind him some minor children, and Dhritarashtra became the natural guardian of them. But at heart, he wanted to become the factual king and hand the kingdom over to his own son, headed by Duryodhana. With all these empirical ambitions, Dhritarashtra wanted to become a king, and he convinced all sorts of intrigues in consultation with his brother-in-law Shakuni. But everything failed by the will of the Lord, and at the last stage, even after losing everything, men and money, he wanted to remain as a king, being the eldest uncle of Maharaj Yudhishthira. Maharaj Yudhishthira, as a matter of duty, maintained Dhritarashtra in royal honor, and Dhritarashtra was happily passing away his numbered days in illusion of being a king or the royal uncle of the king Yudhishthira. Vidura, as a saint and as the duty-bound, affectionate youngest brother of Dhritarashtra, wanted to awaken Dhritarashtra from his slumber of disease and old age. Vidura therefore sarcastically addressed Dhritarashtra as the king, which he was eventually not. Everyone is the servant of eternal time, and therefore no one can be the king in this material world. King means the person who can order. The celebrated English king wanted to order time and tide, but the time and tide refused to obey his order. Therefore, one is a false king in the material world, and Dhritarashtra was particularly reminded of this false position of the factual fearful happenings which had already approached him at that time. Vidura asked him to get out immediately if he wanted to be saved from the fearful situation which was approaching him fast. He did not ask Maharaj Yudhishthira in that way because he knew that a king like Maharaj Yudhishthira is aware of all the fearful situations of this flimsy world and would take care of himself in due course, even though Vidura might not be present at that time. Hare Krishna.
Krishna, thanks so much, Mataji. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vedanta Santi Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirishesha Shanivari Pashtatta Deshatarine. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today to discuss this wonderful section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you so much for the opportunity to try and say something and seeking your blessings that I may, through your mercy, say something that may be of benefit to you. And also just a warm welcome back to good to Kamal. I haven't had your association in a while. Thank you so much for sending wonderful images from the Dham. I was like imagining, I haven't been to Mayapur in so long. 2016, I haven't been since then. So I was relishing all the updates, and yeah, thank you. I hope you had a blissful time out then. I'm sure I'd love to hear lots of your thoughts and realizations from your time out there.
Thank you, Prabhuji, and we witnessed your association as well, and we had a wonderful time. As you know, your parents were with us as well, so we really enjoyed their association as well. And I'd like to welcome Shobha Mataji to this group again. I think this is her first day after the Dham, so thank you very much for joining in, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thanks for joining today, despite your jet lag. They only arrived a couple of days ago, so probably still a little tired. So it's such an amazing passage we're entering in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And as I was reading this verse, Vidura is addressing Dhritarashtra. So he's saying he's referred to as Mahatma Vidura, because Mahatma means great soul. And from earlier texts we've read that Vidura is actually Lord Yamaraj, and we'll go into a little bit of his backstory. So I was reading this, and he's basically telling he's telling Dhritarashtra not to waste time. So I often think of a theme, and the theme for this verse I felt was the trouble with time. I'd like to begin with just I don't know why, but the statement by the Dalai Lama, actually the leader of the current kind of Buddhist movement, he made a statement which was, I'm going to kind of paraphrase, but when he was asked what surprises you most about humanity, and the Dalai Lama said man, because he sacrifices his health to make money, then he sacrifices his money to regain his health, and he's so anxious that he's always thinking about the future, but in reality he doesn't really live in the present or the future, and he lives as if he's never going to die, and then dies having never really lived. And I thought that was just quite a pertinent kind of statement. Obviously that practice is slightly different, but it applies here to Dhritarashtra. He's so anxious and concerned about his position, and about first of all him claiming the throne, then his son Duryodhana claiming the throne and having some position. He's constantly lamenting about the past also, and so, and he's not ever being really present, and forgetting time in this body, this life is very, very limited. That's the trouble with time. We could say, someone could say to me, Kamal, Prabhu, you're still young, enjoy or do this and that. Doesn't matter. Tomorrow my time could be over, as we'll explore. So we can't waste time. We cannot waste time. And the Bhagavatam is so wonderful that it tells us what to do, but sometimes it's difficult to do the right thing immediately. We have to work our way up to it. But it tells us what not to do. And so I thought we could use this session in reference to Srila Prabhupada's purports to, first of all, explore what not to do, and in particular, explore the character of Dhritarashtra. Then there's so much to say. Again, I have like many, characters, devotees that I'm inspired by in the Bhagavatam, and Mahatma Vidura is definitely one of them. So I want to explore a few characteristics of Dhritarashtra and what not to do. Then we can explore the few characteristics of Mahatma Vidur, and here's what to do. And then we can kind of come to a conclusion, hopefully together, about this, the trouble with time. So, who is Dhritarashtra? As we, I'm sure many of you are fully aware, and we've been reading in this section of the Bhagavatam. Just a short backstory is that he is actually the brother of King Pandu. He was born to the mother Ambika, who was a queen who, as we've read early in the Bhagavatam, we discussed the backstory, that sadly the king had passed away, and so there was no heir to the throne. Bhishma Dev had taken a vow of celibacy, and so Vyasadeva was called to impregnate queens. And though Vyasadeva was a renunciate, and he actually united with them through a process called niyoga. And because he was a renunciate, his appearance, although he's such a saintly individual, so highly elevated, but his appearance is quite shabby, you could say, or disheveled. And so upon seeing him, the first queen, she became very afraid and went pale. And upon completing the niyoga process, which is probably, some people would describe it as akin to a spiritual form of artificial insemination. The first queen gave birth to King Pandu, who was born very pale because his mother was afraid when she saw Vyasadeva. So second queen, Ambika, when she saw Vyasadeva, she was also very afraid, and she was so afraid she closed her eyes. And then, so Vyasadeva, after completing the process, then as a result of this process, Ambika gave birth to Dhritarashtra, who, because of this, was born blind. And he took over so he was deemed unfit to take the throne because he was blind. And so King Pandu actually was a powerful king. He took the throne. However, at one point in time, King Pandu was out hunting, and he saw two deers mating, and so he shot the deer with his arrow. But actually, the deer turned out to be a Brahmin who was enjoying with his wife in the form of a deer. And because King Pandu showed no remorse for what he had done to the great sage, he showed no remorse and tried to argue that it was his right as a Kshatriya to hunt. So he was actually cursed by this Muni. And so as a result of this, he went to the forest in exile and handed the throne over temporarily to Dhritarashtra. And unfortunately, later, King Pandu succumbed to the curse, which was that he would, upon trying to consummate with a queen, he would die. And at one point, he became overcome by lust and unfortunately died. So this is a little bit of the backstory of who Dhritarashtra was. So, what not to do, Dhritarashtra's characteristics. So the first one is Dhritarashtra, he was blinded by attachment. So what do I mean by this? Well, he strongly favored Duryodhana, who had many poor qualities, and just by logic, one was undeserving of the throne, because as we know, Duryodhana, he lacked the proper, first of all, birthright. He was younger than Yudhishthira Maharaj, and by right, Yudhishthira Maharaj should have been given the throne. But secondly, by qualities, he didn't have the proper qualities to ascend to the throne. And we can see this in modern day society, where people achieve positions of power because of their birthright or their position or their reputation or various things, bribery. But actually, the Vedic method and the intelligent method is to give a person a position and treat them accordingly based on their characteristics, based on their character, based on their qualities, not based on our attachments. But so how can we learn from this? Well, often, we can favor people unduly. Maybe it's like a relative, maybe it's our children we favor too much, we're too attached. Maybe it's our friends, maybe it's our family members. And what happens is we become blinded by attachment. Due to our unhealthy attachment, it's always good to have a certain level of attachment to family and friends. That's normal. And to the things we possess. But unhealthy attachment means we're unable to let these things go. We're unable to be discerning and see right from wrong. There's an old English saying, the lady doth protest too much. I'll just say that again. The lady doth protest too much. And what this means is, and what's it in reference to, is in Old English literature, sometimes a lady, she would be, she is inquired about whether she has interest in a particular man. And she will very ardently kind of say, no, I'm not interested in such a man. And be very, very firm about it. And almost too much. The lady doth protest too much. And what this means is that actually, because she's protesting so much, she probably does like that man. Okay, so why am I mentioning this? Because if we want to see where our attachments are, just see where we're protesting too much. I'll give you an example. So we're trying to, one kind of principle of Krishna consciousness is live simply. Don't accumulate too many things. Because if you accumulate too many things, you'll become attached to those things. And you become attached to those things, you'll remember them as opposed to Krishna at the time of death, which is what we're all preparing for. And so I was, my wife is saying, you know what, we've moved here now, you've got so many old clothes, you should get rid of them. And I was like saying, oh no, I can get rid of my clothes, no problem. And I was very, kind of adamant that I had no problem getting rid of my clothes. Old clothes. But when it came to getting rid of them, the words didn't match the actions. And it took a long, long time. And then finally I realized, I have some attachment there to having certain clothes. It's like, I spent so much money on this, and it's still in not bad condition and all this. And I was too attached. And then slowly, I've come to realize this. And so now I have this practice where if I buy like a new jumper, this is a new jumper, then I'll get rid of 2 jumpers. So like this, slowly, I'm just getting rid of like a lot of old clothes and trying to have, the least amount, just the bare minimum that I need, and not be too attached to these things. So this is one attachment that I had. So yeah, this the first thing from Dhritarashtra that we can learn is not to do is don't be blinded by attachment. Okay, the second characteristic of Dhritarashtra was that he was resentful. He was resentful. So, firstly, he would curse his own blindness. He would curse the fact that, oh, why have I born blind? Fate is so unfavorable to me. And of course, we've heard many times in different classes his backstory that actually 50 lifetimes ago, he was a very kind of cruel hunter. And as a hunter, there was a nest full of chicklets, and he was so cruel that he sent an arrow with a flame into that nest, and the father bird came to try and save the nest, was unsuccessful in doing so, and this nest actually contained 100 kind of chicklets, and so they were all killed. And the father, whilst trying to save the chicklets, became blind due to the flames. And so the karma works in such a mysterious way. But actually, when you think about it, just to have one child takes so much sukritri, so much good karma. So he took many, many lifetimes to to gain the amount of good sukriti, pious credits, to have so many sons, the Kauravas, and then was hit with the reaction. So we can see sometimes, you know, he was very resentful of the fact that he was blind, and but sometimes we have things which are beyond our control, and we can become resentful, and we could even become resentful of God. Why me? Why is this happening to me? But obviously, we have the understanding from the philosophy that there's a reason for everything that happens to us. And if it's beyond our control, I know it's easy for me to say, difficult to practice, but we have to continue to hear this philosophy, hear Bhagavatam, understand actually, you know, this is there to teach me something. This is my karma. And the sooner I accept this, rather than being resentful, because that's only going to hurt me, instead, see that this can actually be work in my favor. You know, and another occasion, after his sons have been killed in the Battle of Kurukshetra, now Dhritarashtra, he had a boon that he was actually extremely powerful. And it was said that he was stronger than 100 elephants. He could even crush iron. And after the Battle of Kurukshetra, the Pandavas went to pay respects. But Krishna warned, because there was one Pandava who had killed many, many Kauravas, and that was Lord Bhim. And so Dhritarashtra, he was holding on to all this resentment. And so Krishna said, don't hug Dhritarashtra, give him a statue instead and tell him that's you. So they gave him a statue, and Dhritarashtra crushed this statue with his strength. And afterwards he resented, thinking, oh no, I've killed Bhim. What have I done? But he hadn't, he just crushed the statue. But you can see here, so this is another thing, is that he was holding on to, due to his unhealthy attachment and him being resentful, he was sorry, someone's just calling me here. He was holding on to this resentment towards the Pandavas, even though they were just following the righteous duty of you know, following the dharma. So this sometimes, you know, people can do things to us, people can hurt us, people can do things we don't like. And how will we react? Will we hold on to that resentment and try to hurt them in return? Or will we think, okay, this has happened now, we can't change time. Yes, you know, we can be upset. Obviously, it's understandable he will be upset. Those are his children that have been killed. However, can we learn to process things? Okay, this has happened. I have no control over the past. I do feel sad about it, so I can express this sadness. I can go through what's known as a grieving process, which actually has 5 stages. But then eventually, can I let go of this resentment? Because ultimately that resentment is a form of anger, it's in the mode of ignorance, and that's only going to serve to hurt me. I remember when I started high school, as an 11-year-old, and unfortunately I was bullied quite a lot when I was younger. You know, I was, you know, obviously from an Indian background, and that was in the north of England, and there were not many Indians in my school, not many ethnic minorities, and also I was small, and you know, in my primary school we all had a briefcase. So in my high school I took a briefcase to school, and all the other kids had normal bags, and I was made fun of. And there's this one guy in particular, his name was Oliver, and he would bully me quite badly. In fact, you know, he threatened to beat me up, he threatened to break my nose. On one occasion, he was just pushing me with his fists. Yeah, many occasions, he would just humiliate me in front of people. And then a few years passed, I got a bit older, and because you know, I grew up a bit, and so I grew older, and then I grew a bit more I got into boxing and things like that. And then a few years later, this guy Oliver was in my class again. So this was by this time. So when he was first in my class, I was 11, and by the time he was in my class again, I was about 15. I'd become a bit more tough, and I thought, all right, Haribol. No, I didn't say Haribol, but I thought, right, he's gonna try and bully me, and he's gonna get it now. I'm gonna show him the what's what. But the problem is, he'd heard about how I'd become tough, and he became very nice to me. But the problem was, I was so disappointed. I was holding on to all this resentment towards him, and I wanted to beat him up, and I couldn't now because he was being nice to me. And I remember years later still thinking, I hadn't let go of this towards him, what he'd done. And I thought, he's getting on with his life. But yet here I am, many years later, still remembering how he bullied me. And we were both only children at the time, and he was probably going through his own things as well. And so I went through a process and thinking, he's only acting how he's probably, maybe he may have been struggling in his home life and taking it out on other children. And that's usually how bullies become bullies, is that they're either being bullied at home or by other people. And so, yeah, one way we can see, are we still resentful, is when someone asks us about a person that may have hurt us in the past, do we still talk about it? And how do we talk about them? Do we talk about them in a compassionate way? Or do we talk about it? Do we go on and on and on about it, about what they did to us and things like that? And that way you can tell we're still resentful. And unfortunately, resentment is a form of anger, which is in the mode of ignorance. I'm not saying this is an easy process, but if we don't work through this, then that resentment will hold us back in our spiritual life also. So this is the second point, is that he's resentful, still holding on to everything that's happened to him. And the final point about what not to do, and Dhritarashtra's characteristics, is that he was jealous and he took pleasure in the suffering of others. So he was jealous of King Pandu's position. He was jealous of the good qualities of the Pandavas compared to his own children. The Pandavas were often glorified by Mahatma Vidyur and Bhishmadev, and they were favored by them compared to his own children. And he took pleasure in the suffering of others. So at one point in the Mahabharata, it's explained that Dhritarashtra cruelly had arranged for the Pandavas to live in this house, which he'd rigged with lak, which is a type of fuel. And he actually planned to burn the Pandavas alive in that house. Thankfully, we'll hear later that Vidur was there to protect the Pandavas and warn them about this. But they burned that house down so badly that they assumed the Pandavas must have been killed. And he actually performed the last rites of the Pandavas thinking that they were dead. And so it's actually Srila Prabhupada said earlier in this chapter, he cheerfully performed the last rites of the Pandavas, cheerfully. Can you believe that? So he's just killed his nephews and he's cheerfully performing their last rites. So he's taking pleasure in the killing and suffering of his own nephews. Now we can think, oh, I would never do such a thing. But then think again, do we sometimes take pleasure in the suffering of others? And then that's something for us to think about. Do we sometimes take pleasure in the suffering of others? There's been times where I've been hurt by people, and then we'll see that they're not in such a good condition. And we may feel, see, you did this to me, and now look at you. Now look at you. Look at your position. You're not happy. This has happened to you, that. There's actually, sadly, and again, I'm not above this for sure, but it's a demoniac quality to take joy from the suffering of others. So the way we can deal with this is something to work on. We can think, okay, this person, they only hurt me because they were also suffering. And now they're suffering further. I can feel sorry for them. I can pray for them. And something practical is Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, if he had two disciples who were in disagreement, he would put them together and ask them to say all the good things about the other person. So there's always good to be found in everyone. And that's one way we can kind of alleviate. And our mind has a tendency to focus on the negative. So these are a few things not to do in accordance with the character of Dhritarashtra. Don't be blinded by attachment. Don't be resentful and hold on to things. And if you are seeing that you're doing that and still talking about things that happened in the past, then think about why, maybe get some help, talk to someone, and try and process this, because this is only going to hold you back. And jealousy and taking pleasure in the suffering of others. Do we often think, I wish I had what that other person had? And do I take pleasure in the suffering of others? And this is, again, something that we need to identify in ourselves and work on. But now we talk about what to do. And this is exemplified by Mahatma Vidura, the great soul. So a little bit of his backstory, as we've explored earlier in this chapter. So he's actually born of a pious maidservant of the queen's. So we talked about one of the queens. She was frightened and went pale and gave birth to King Pandu. One of the queens, she was afraid and closed her eyes in shock. She gave birth to Dhritarashtra. But then this maidservant was very pious. She paid her obeisances to Lord Vyasadeva, and she gave birth to Mahatma Vidura, great soul. So, and we know his backstory is actually that he is actually Lord Yamaraj, who was cursed by Manduka Muni. So, I mean, this was all ordained by Krishna, of course, because what an amazing character, Mahajan, to have. He's one of the 12 Mahajans. So great souls who are there to spread Krishna consciousness. And so he's there taking care of the Pandavas. But yes, we know for his backstory that there was a great Brahmin who a robber took shelter in his home. And so then the thieves took flight. But the authorities arrested the Brahmin, and out of punishment, he was due to be lanced. So, like, they'd put the Brahmin on actually a lance, and put the lance through him. But just as this was about to happen, and through his yogic powers, he was able to remain uninjured. He was saved. He was proven. His innocence was proved. And he questioned Lord Yamaraj, why did this happen to me? And Lord Yamaraj, who we know is the lord of the underworld, so to speak, and the lord of handing out the punishments. And he said, well, when you were a young child, you placed straw through, you pricked straw through an ant, and so you received this punishment. And the Brahmin was like, no, according to the laws of karma, they don't affect, you don't get reactions for when you're a child, which is fair, which is correct. So he cursed Lord Yamaraj to be born as a Sudra. But actually he wasn't, he was born of Vyasadeva, and despite the fact that he was born to what's known as a Sudrani, he was actually a very, very great and elevated soul, as we're about to explore. So Mahatma Vidura, some characteristics of what to do is he was righteous. He was righteous. So he would always do the right thing. Even though he was living in the house of Dhritarashtra and kind of, in one sense, maintained by Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, he actually, because he could see that the Pandavas were very pious. They had such good qualities. Because of that, even though Duryodhana and so were maintaining him, he actually warned them when the house was about to be burnt, that Dhritarashtra was setting up a trap for them. And on the 14th night, when the housekeeper had been instructed to set fire to the house, this was the 14th night of the waxing moon, or something like that. He warned the Pandavas. And he'd also given a cryptic message, which Yudhishthira, being very intelligent, could also understand, that they had planned to kill them by arson. So he was righteous. He'd always say the right thing and do the right thing. And sometimes we're in a position where we're getting favored, where some people are giving us some favor. We have some position, And then, but we'll see things that are wrong. We'll see someone doing something wrong. Do we speak up? Or do we want to maintain our position or nice relations with that person or within society? Or will we speak up when we see that something is been done wrong to a person? And will we speak up? Will we, even if that might harm our position, which it did for Vidya. He was in a very nice position, living in a palace, well maintained, brother of the king, etc. He could have just kept quiet, but he was righteous, so he did the right thing. He spoke up and said something, even though it put his position in jeopardy. So the first one, he was righteous. Okay, so the second point, he was sensitive and compassionate. So I'll say this again, he was sensitive and compassionate. So we've been exploring this chapter, and in the very text within this chapter, text 13, is described compassionate Mahatma Vidhu could not stand to see the Pandavas distressed at any time. Therefore, he did not disclose this unpalatable and unbearable incident because calamities come of their own accord. What does it mean by this? It's referring to the collapse of the Yadu dynasty. Obviously, the Pandavas very attached to Lord Krishna, and it would have been so disheartening for them to hear of the collapse of the Yadu dynasty, particularly at that time. And in accordance with the Bhagavad Gita, obviously we know in the 17th chapter, Krishna gives the 4 austerities of speech, which are you must speak words which are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, but also not agitating to others. So, there's many times in my life I look back and I think, what I would have said is right, but it wasn't the right thing to say. If you told the Pandavas here, the Yadu dynasty has collapsed, this is a difficult time right now for the Pandavas. It wasn't the right time. He's being sensitive and compassionate to their situation. So although he knew they would find out eventually, but that wasn't the right time. So he was sensitive to that. And sometimes I look back at my life and they have this saying, brutally honest, but actually one shouldn't be brutally honest. One could be honest, but if it's going to be brutal, we need to be sensitive of what we're saying to that person. Whereabouts are they at? What situation are they in? How are they feeling? Is this going to agitate them too much if we give them the truth? Is it going to be unpalatable for them? So we have to really think about this. And this is something we can really learn from Mahatma Vidhu, is that he was sensitive and he was very compassionate. So he was righteous, he was sensitive and compassionate. He was detached. Unlike Dhritarashtra was attached, he was detached and he was humble. And how was this demonstrated? Well, first of all, he was detached because he had such a comfortable position under the shelter of Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. But we know that before the Battle of Kurukshetra, Vidura was nowhere to be seen. Why? Because he left to go on a pilgrimage. He was insulted by Duryodhana. He was called, the son of a Sudra, and he was like, oh, you're just, the son of a Sudra. He was insulted, even though he'd helped raise them. He'd given them so many good instructions. He was their well-wisher. He was the well-wisher of Dhritarashtra. And yet he left it all behind, left behind the comforts, his comfortable position, comfortable status, comfortable living situation. And he left it all to go on a pilgrimage. And he was humble because he took shelter of Maitreya Rishi and heard about the supreme truth from this Rishi. So in the same way, as we go along in our journey in Krishna consciousness, we have to be willing to give up many things. Give up comfortable positions, give up our high positions in society. And ultimately, we need that humility to understand that we don't know everything. No matter how long we've been around, no matter how many books we've read, we need to take shelter of a guru. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, just try to inquire from a spiritual master humbly, submissively. And unfortunately, if we don't become humble and inquire submissively, and we develop this mentality that, you know, oh, I've done Bhakti Sastri, I've done Bhakti Vaibhav, I've read the Bhagavatam many times, so I've been to this class, I've heard so many lectures, I know it all. Unfortunately, we won't make any advancement on the spiritual path. It's so important to have this mentality. I believe it's Radhanath Maharaj who said, I already know this. That statement, I already know this, is the statement of an unrealized soul. Why? Particularly when it comes to spiritual topics, is we can never fully know it. Because unlike material knowledge, 1 + 1 is 2. That's it. Done. With spiritual knowledge, it's not linear. It's not like you know it and you know this and you know this and you advance. No, it's like a spiral. Keshav Maharaj was once telling me it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And I can see this in my own life, is that sometimes my Guru Maharaj is giving me an instruction and I just couldn't understand why he's telling me to do this. And a few years later, a light bulb comes on. It's like, oh, it made sense what he was saying though at the time. And even now, sometimes he says, do this. And I said, I don't quite understand, Guru Maharaj. He said, you will understand later. So this is spiritual knowledge. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper and a deeper understanding. So he was detached and humble. And finally, he was forgiving. So he had been insulted so badly by Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra. He'd been looked down upon and, you know, they spoke down to him in this way. But despite being insulted so much, and he was in a lot of pain because he was their well-wisher. Ultimately, he cared for them. That was his brother and that was his nephew. So he still cared for them and was always trying to do the best for them. But instead, they insulted him so much and he was in a lot of pain as he left. But he didn't hold on to it. He forgave them. And in fact, now we can come to this section of the Bhagavatam where he'd forgiven Dhritarashtra and he's still trying to help him. Can you just think about this for a second? Imagine a family member, a friend, an acquaintance, a work colleague, someone has insulted us badly, really badly. And yet we forgive them. Not only do we forgive them, we try and help them. This is what he's doing to Dhritarashtra. This is the character of Dhritarashtra. He's so forgiving that he's trying to help him also. And there's a saying that you should always try and help people. But if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. At least don't hurt them. And I remember many years ago, I was at the temple and I was going through a really tough time. I'd been hurt by someone, and yeah, I was really like kind of mentally agitated. This was around 2015, and I bumped into like an old friend of mine at the temple, and I was really angry at this devotee had hurt me and done some bad things to me. And this devotee, this friend of mine, he just said, just let it go, just let it go. And at the time, I thought, how can I let it go? That's very dismissive of everything that I've been through. What happened a few years later? He was in the exact same position, and he was mentally agitated. He's the exact same situation, and he came to me for advice. And I'll be honest, where I was at, I felt like saying to him, just let it go. Probably it's easy, just let it go. And I thought, it's not so easy now, is it? But I thought, you know what? No, I can't do this. You know, he's suffering just like I was. And thankfully, even though I was thinking that, which shows where my mentality was, where my mind was at, I did the right thing. I supported him. I helped him for many months. I helped him, kind of get through that difficult situation. So I did eventually, and I forgave him for also being harsh towards me. But it's difficult, and it's very much an internal process. So, in summary, we've talked about the Bhagavatam gives so many. The trouble with time is that where time is limited. And if we spend time doing the wrong things and focusing on the things we shouldn't be doing, like Dhritarashtra, blinded by attachment, being resentful or being jealous, then we're dragging ourselves down, we're wasting time. And ultimately, we're trying to elevate our consciousness. We're preparing for the moment of death. That's what life is about. Life is actually living. We're preparing Our whole life is preparing for that one moment of death. We're trying to remember Krishna, and that's going to ultimately determine our next destination. Or we can do the right thing like Mahatma Vidur. We can try and be righteous, do the right thing, speak up, even though it may be detriment to our relationships and to our position. We can be sensitive and compassionate and not say the right thing at the wrong time. We can be detached and humble. We can give up unnecessary comforts, and we can be humble enough to accept that we don't know everything, and inquire from people who are more learned than us, and eventually find a guru. And we can forgive, because again, another Buddhist saying is that being angry at someone, is like holding on to a hot coal and expecting them to get burned. Ultimately, we're the only ones who suffer. So we can work on forgiving people, even if they may have hurt us, they may have insulted us. And ultimately, we have to allow Krishna to make the arrangements for us. We have this like illusion. I was listening to a nice class by His Grace Mahatma Prabhu on this verse, and he was saying that we have this illusion that we have to arrange our own happiness. So Krishna is saying to us, I've made all arrangements for you. You've got a beautiful house, unlimited happiness, everything's friendships, relationships. You'll never be in anxiety. Just let me make all the arrangements for you. All you have to do is just keep coming to me. Well, Maya's saying, no, just get the money, get a house, find a nice spouse, raise children in get them some high position, and then people are like, wow, look at your children, or look at you, get them highly educated, get some high status, get respect, and then you'll be happy. That's what Maya's saying. And then His Grace Mahatma Prabhu was asking him, he said, how's that working out for you? How's that working out for you? Are you happy yet? So instead, we have to let Krishna, deal with this. And as we're talking about Vidura, I just wanted to share a nice pastime I heard recently about Lord Yamaraj. So there's a meeting of all the devas and even the Lord himself at the abode of Lord Shiva at Mount Kailash. And so all the devas were appearing. Indra came on his elephant. Lord Yamaraj came. Anyone know what Lord Yamaraj rides? His steed?
A buffalo?
Thank you very much, Maji. So Lord Yamaraj came on his buffalo, and Lord Shiva was there, of course, on a cow at the time, Nandini, and then, of course, the Lord Narayan, he appears for this meeting, and he appears on Garuda. So he appears there, and all the devas and Lord Narayan are walking into the entrance of Mount Kailash. But Lord Yamaraj, he has a kind of serious look on his face, and he's looking at a sparrow which is seated on the top of the entrance, and he has a frown on his face. And Garuda notices this, and then Garuda, he's half bird, half man, so he empathizes with that species, birds, and he thinks, oh no, he says, Lord Yamaraj, he's displeased with this sparrow. Something bad is going to happen to the sparrow. I must take care of it. So he takes the sparrow and he flies many, many miles away and places the sparrow at the top of a tree. And then Lord Garuda feels peaceful in his heart. He's taking care of his friend, the sparrow. He returns to the meeting. And then all the devas come out. Lord Yamaraj comes out. And he looks, and he seems relieved and satisfied. All is well with the world. And then later he explains that the reason he was kind of looking awry is that Lord Yamaraj, he knows when everyone's going to die. And he knew when that sparrow was going to die. And that sparrow had been ordained due to his karma to be killed by a python in a tree many miles away from there. And because the sparrow was there, he became very perturbed. But Garuda actually had fulfilled that prophecy. And why am I saying this is that, we don't have to try too hard, for happiness. especially not materially, because so much isn't in our control. We don't need to worry so much about. During this, while I was speaking, my manager was actually calling me, saying, "Are you free for a call?" And I was a little bit worried, and then I thought, I'll call him back after this call, not to worry. And I think, yeah, there's so many things we can worry about. But ultimately, if we're attached to these things, we're worrying about our job, about, so many material things, and trying to control everything, the moment of death, that's what we'll be thinking about instead of thinking of Krishna. So life is just a preparation for death. So it's just so important. Don't chase after doing the wrong things and chasing after the wrong things. So there's a few thoughts on this amazing character, Mahatma Vidya, and his pastimes with Lord Dhritarashtra. I'd like to thank you so much for your kind attention. And please forgive me for any mistakes I've made today. And I'd welcome any corrections, any comments, or any questions at this time. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Like always, a fantastic class to do what not to do and what to do. And as you said, it's simple to say and think that I should be doing it, but when it comes to putting it in action, it becomes a little difficult. Prabhuji, I'd like to touch on the topic of forgiveness. So if somebody has wronged you and you cannot ask for forgiveness, but in your mind, can you forgive him? So I start there that, okay, I have forgiven you. When you hold on to the pains that they have given you, the resentment, as we studied today, you hold on to resentment and you become angry, and then it will come in your thoughts and actions as well. So the first step, would it be to forgive that person in your mind? Because you cannot walk up to that person because he's hurt you so much and say that.
So actually, thank you so much, Maggie. It's such an important question. And people will just say to you, like that friend said to me, just let it go. It's not that easy. If it was that easy, then we'd all be pure devotees, But it's not that easy to let things go when someone insults us. So the first step is to accept, I'm upset about this, accept this has happened and it was wrong. It wasn't right. Accept our own feelings, accept that we feel angry, we feel sad, and then process those emotions first. Because if we don't do that first, we can say, oh yeah, I forgive you. But then someone says, do you really forgive that person? And I'll be like, no, but they did this, we'll go into this monologue, or we'll be talking. That will show us, that's a lesson to us, think, oh, no, I haven't forgiven. So it's not just, it's a process of first understanding, how do we feel about what happened? Why do I feel that way? And then it's a process of understanding, why do I not need to feel this way anymore? And finally, then the last stage is actually forgiveness. But it's a process getting to that stage. Prabhupada says earlier in the Bhagavatam, the cure for anger is to learn how to forgive. So he doesn't say to forgive, he says learn how to forgive. So this is something we need to learn how to do. And my wife actually did a course with a disciple of Prabhupada's called About Grief. And there's 5 stages to grief. So sometimes we need to go through this process. So the course she did was with something called Karuna Care. It's by Her Grace Rambaru Mataji, amazing devotee and disciple of Prabhupada. And sometimes we think that we can get from one stage to the other very quickly, but unfortunately, my experience is it doesn't work like that. And we need to take our time. And for different people, it takes different amounts of time, but we have to recognize and work on it and not think, oh yeah, I've forgiven them. Yeah, it's easy, because our actions will tell us whether we've forgiven them or not. My friend, one of my good friends, he recently sadly lost his father, very unexpectedly. And some people, I just keep telling him, take your time, and he may never fully get over it. We don't tell people to rush that kind of grief, but yet we tell people to rush other kinds. But that, whether we've been insulted or whether we've lost a loved one, they can be equally as painful and disturbing for the mind. So it's important we take our time to process this, just as we would process the loss of a loved one. So there's some thoughts on that. I hope that helps, Matthew.
Yes, it definitely does. Thank you very much. I know we have exhausted our time, but are there any other questions or comments? Quick one, so that we can return Prabhuji back to his manager.
No problem.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam.
Hare
Yes,
Krishna,
Ashok.
Prabhuji.
Prabhu, we were talking about the story of Dhritarashtra having did this horrible act of killing the birds and then causing some pain to the father bird and then becoming blind, and then he eventually gets this reaction back as Dhritarashtra, and then he becomes blind and then loses all his children. Seeing this act of law of karma taking this kind of a action, so we are killing so many insects, like when mosquito bites, and then there are a lot of cockroaches in the house, we just mercilessly kill them. I mean, obviously we are getting the bad karma. I mean, to some extent, of course, there's some defense which is allowed in the karma, but still there's some kind of a reaction to whatever we do.
Yes.
What more thoughts on that, Prabhu?
Yes, absolutely. So basically, the kind of simple answer is that if we become Krishna conscious, we've done so many things, but Krishna can just remove all that. There's a very famous short clip where a devotee is asking Prabhupada, I'm sure you've seen it. He's saying, the devotee is asking Prabhupada, he's saying, so we've accrued many, many lifetimes of karma, so does it mean that we have to accrue many, many lifetimes of pious activities to, overcome this? What does Prabhupada say? He says, 1 minute. He says, the moment you become Krishna conscious, because the whole point of karma is to teach us a lesson, ultimately. It's not just there as a punishment. It's not just like, it doesn't work like that. It's also to teach us something. But if by becoming Krishna conscious, so say, I've killed many insects and things like that, but the moment I become Krishna conscious, I'll have compassion even for the insect. And that's the whole point of karma. So then we don't need to get the reaction. The second thing is Krishna removes all the karma. So I'll actually, in reference to that, and we see many, even devotees doing maybe so-called wrong things. I thought I'd share a little poem by His Grace Mahatma Prabhu on relation to this. It's quite short, so it's quite funny as well. So I thought I'd just share it as a closing note on, like, we can see people doing wrong things. It doesn't mean they won't make it back to Godhead in this life. So it's called I Was Shocked. I was shocked, confused, and bewildered as I entered Goloka's door, not by the beauty of it all, nor the light or its decor, but it was the devotees in Goloka that I was amazed to see. I knew them all on earth, but they had so little bhakti. There stood my Sankirtan leader, the one who stole Krishna's money twice. Next to him was my old TP, who was never ever nice. Krishna Das, who never preached, who seemed so insincere, was sitting ecstatically with Krishna, to whom he seemed so dear. I asked my guru, what's going on? Of this I don't know what to make. How'd all these devotees end up here? Did someone make a mistake? And why is everyone so quiet, so somber? Give me a clue. Quite, Prabhu, he said. They're all in shock. No one thought they'd be seeing you.
True, Prabhu. So, yeah, thank you so much, Prabhu, for the wonderful answer and also wonderful quote. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
so much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Are there any other questions or comments? I can request Arya Govind Prabhu to end the session, Prabhu, if possible.
Yes. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Prabhu, so much for this wonderful session. As Mataji told, that you broke down the theme into wonderfully into what to do and what not to do based on the theme of Vidura and Dhritarashtra, which is the main subject of this chapter. Thank you so much, Prabhu. I humbly request all the devotees to unmute and then chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra once in glorification of His Grace Kamal Panchal Prabhu.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Rama
Rama
Rama,
Rama,
Hare Hare.
Vancha kalpatarubhascha,
Kalpatarubhyascha Krupa
Kripa sindhubheva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
His Grace Kamal Panchal Prabhu ki. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.